Jake Morrison stood in the Memorial Gardens on New Terra, watching the morning sun cast long shadows across thousands of stone markers. Each stone bore the name of someone lost in the Great Purge 50 years ago. His weathered hands traced the smooth surface of one particular marker that read, Sarah Morrison, beloved wife and mother. The air was cool and quiet here. Birds that had been brought from the old colonies sang in the trees overhead. Jake came here every year on this day, the anniversary of the attack that changed everything for humanity. Dad, you're going to be late for the briefing, a voice said behind him. Jake turned to see his daughter Lisa approaching. She wore the blue uniform of a lieutenant in the Earth Defense Force. At 28, she had never known the old Earth, never seen the green hills and blue oceans that existed before the aliens came. The briefing can wait, Jake said. Some things are more important than schedules. Lisa sighed and stood beside her father. She had heard this speech before, but she listened anyway. Jake pointed to the memorial wall, where holographic images showed scenes from before the Purge. Children playing in parks, families gathered around dinner tables, cities full of life and laughter. 6 different alien races came together to destroy us. Jake said, they called us dangerous. They said we were too violent, too unpredictable. They were afraid of what humans might become if we were allowed to spread across the galaxy. That was 50 years ago, Dad. Lisa said gently, most of the people who made that decision are probably dead now. Jake shook his head. Dead doesn't bring back the billions we lost. Dead doesn't rebuild the worlds they burned. And dead sure doesn't mean we should forget what they did to us. They walked through the garden in silence for a while. Other people moved quietly among the stones, some leaving flowers, others just standing and remembering. These were the survivors, the ones who had escaped to the outer rim when the killing started. Jake's ship, the U.S. Defiance, waited for them at the spaceport. It was an old vessel, built during the war years when humans had to learn quickly how to fight back. The hull bore scars from countless battles, and the crew who served on it were mostly people like Jake, survivors who had lost everything. Captain Morrison called out Commander Tony Martinez as they boarded. We just received a priority message from the diplomatic station. Ambassador Walsh wants to speak with you immediately. Jake frowned. Katie Walsh had been Earth's main diplomat for the past 10 years. She worked out of a secret station hidden in the asteroid belt, tried to maintain what little contact humanity had with the rest of the galaxy. If she was calling, it meant something important had happened. They made their way to the communications room. The large screen flickered to life, showing Katie's face. She looked tired, older than her 45 years. Behind her, Jake could see the sterile walls of her station. Jake, we have a situation, Katie said without greeting. I received a message this morning from the Galactic Council. Jake felt his jaw tighten. The Galactic Council was the organization that had voted to eliminate humanity. Hearing from them was never good news. What do they want? He asked. They want to meet, Katie said. They claim there's a new threat that requires our help. Lisa stepped forward. Our help? After what they did to us. That's what I thought too, Katie replied. But Jake, they sound desperate. The message came directly from Council Leader Zethkar himself. You remember him? Jake remembered. Zethkar was a Krillian, one of the mantis-like aliens who had been most vocal about the need to destroy humanity. He had given speeches about how humans were a cancer that would spread across the galaxy, if not stopped. What kind of threat? Jake asked. They wouldn't say much over an open channel, Katie said. But they mentioned something called the Void Swarm. Whatever it is, it has them scared enough to ask for help from people they try to wipe out. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Around him, his crew waited to hear what he would say. These were men and women who had lost family and friends in the Purge. They had spent their lives fighting to protect the scattered human colonies that remained. What do you think we should do? Lisa asked. I think we should remember who we're dealing with. Jake said, these are the same aliens who burned our worlds and killed our families. They made their choice 50 years ago. But Dad, Lisa said, what if this threat is real? What if it's something that could destroy everyone, including us? Jake looked at his daughter. She belonged to a generation that wanted to move forward, to build something new instead of dwelling on the past. But Jake had seen the ships falling from the sky on Earth. He had held his wife as she died from radiation poisoning. He had watched entire colonies burn, while alien fleets blocked any attempt at escape. "The past matters, Lisa," he said. "If we forget what they did to us, we dishonor everyone who died. We also make it more likely to happen again." Katie spoke up from the screen. "Jake, I need you to come to the station. Admiral Bennett is already on her way from Haven. Whatever this is about, it's big enough that they want our top people involved." Jake nodded. Admiral Carol Bennett was the highest-ranking human military officer, commander of the secret fleets that protected the hidden colonies. If she was getting involved, the situation was serious. "Set course for the diplomatic station," Jake told his crew, "and send word to all the colony ships. If something new is coming, they need to be ready." As the Defiance left orbit, Jake stood on the bridge looking back at New Terra. The memorial gardens were just a small dot on the planet's surface now, but he could still picture every stone, every name, every face in the holographic displays. Lisa joined him at the window. "Do you really think they deserve our help?" she asked. "It's not about what they deserve," Jake said. "It's about what we can live with. If we let innocent people die because of our anger, how are we different from them?" "But you still don't trust them." "Trust." Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lisa, trust is earned, and they used up any claim to our trust 50 years ago when they decided we didn't deserve to exist." The stars stretched past them as the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. Whatever waited for them at the diplomatic station, Jake knew it would not be simple. The galaxy had shown its true face once before. Now it wanted something from humanity again. The question was whether humans were strong enough to help their former enemies without forgetting the lessons written in blood across a dozen burned worlds. The diplomatic station hung in space like a metal flower, its arms reaching out toward the stars. Jake had never liked the place. It was built to look peaceful and welcoming, but he knew the real reason it existed. Humanity needed somewhere to talk to the galaxy without revealing where their colonies were hidden. Ambassador Katie Walsh met them at the docking bay. She looked even more tired in person, with dark circles under her eyes and tension lines around her mouth. "Admiral Bennett is already here," she said as they walked through the station's corridors. "She arrived an hour ago with 2 escort ships." "How is she taking the news?" Jake asked. "About as well as you'd expect," Katie replied. "She hasn't spoken to anyone since she got here. Just sits in the conference room staring at the wall." They found Admiral Carol Bennett exactly where Katie said she would be. She sat alone at the long table, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her uniform perfectly pressed despite the long journey from Haven. At 63, she was one of the few people who remembered Earth before the Purge. "Jake," she said without looking up, "took you long enough." "Traffic was light," Jake replied, taking a seat across from her. Lisa and Tony sat nearby, while Katie moved to activate the room's communication systems. "Are we really doing this?" Carol asked. "Are we really going to sit here and listen to them beg for help?" "We're going to listen," Katie said. "What we do after that is up to us." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Galactic Council chambers. The room was vast and circular, with representatives from dozens of alien species seated in tiers around a central speaking area. At the center stood Council Leader Zethkar, his mantis-like form towering over the podium. Jake felt his hands clench into fists as he looked at the alien. Zethkar had personally signed the order that authorized the destruction of human colonies. His species, the Krillians, had provided many of the ships used in the attacks. "Honored representatives," Zethkar began, his translated voice coming through the speakers. "Thank you for agreeing to this emergency session. The threat we face requires immediate action." Around the chamber, Jake could see familiar faces. There was Admiral Ezesek of the Naga, whose serpentine people had been the first to attack human settlements. High Crystalline Veltar the Vorthan sat in her glowing alcove, her crystal body reflecting light in rainbow patterns. These were the beings who had voted for genocide 50 years ago. "The entity we call the Void Swarm has consumed 17 star systems in the past 6 months," Zethkar continued. Our best fleets have been unable to slow their advance. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They simply destroy everything in their path. A holographic display appeared above the podium, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated the systems that had been destroyed. Jake could see a pattern in the attacks, a methodical progression that suggested intelligence behind the destruction. What exactly are we looking at? Carol asked, speaking for the first time since the transmission began. Zethkar turned toward the human observers. Even through the screen, Jake could see the aliens' compound eyes focusing on them. Admiral Bennett, Captain Morrison, thank you for joining us. Don't thank us yet, Carol replied coldly. Just answer the question. The display changed, showing close-up images of the destroyed systems. Where planets had once existed, only empty space remained. No debris, no asteroids, nothing but vacuum. The void swarm appears to be composed of mechanical entities. Zethkar explained. They consume matter at the molecular level, breaking it down into energy which they use to create more themselves. They leave nothing behind. Why should we care? Jake asked bluntly. You try to wipe us out because you thought we were dangerous. Now something actually dangerous shows up, and you want our help. The chamber fell silent. Jake could see the alien representatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, Zethkar spoke again. Captain Morrison, we understand your anger. The decisions made 50 years ago were regrettable. Regrettable? Carol's voice was sharp as a knife. You killed 8 billion people. You burned our worlds and hunted the survivors like animals. That's not regrettable. That's genocide. Yes, said a new voice from the chamber. Admiral Aztec had risen from her seat, her snake-like body coiling as she moved to the speaking area. It was genocide. We acted out of fear, and billions of innocent beings died because of that fear. Jake had not expected this admission. In all the years since the Purge, no alien government had ever acknowledged what they had done to humanity. We cannot undo the past, Aztec continued, but we can acknowledge our mistakes and try to do better. The void swarm threatens all life in the galaxy. If we fall, you fall with us. Maybe that's justice, Lisa said quietly. Her father looked at her in surprise, but she continued. Maybe it's justice that the people who destroyed others are themselves destroyed. High crystalline Veltar's voice chimed like glass bells. Young human, justice serves no one if the universe becomes empty. The void swarm does not distinguish between guilty and innocent. It consumes all equally. Katie leaned forward in her chair. What makes you think we can help? Our fleets are small, our technology limited. What do we have that you don't? Dan Cooper, the human historian who served as Katie's advisor, had been quiet until now. He was a thin man with graying hair who had spent years studying both human and alien military tactics. They're not asking for our ships or our weapons, he said. They're asking for our way of thinking. Zethkar nodded his triangular head. Precisely. The void swarm operates with perfect logic, perfect efficiency. Our military strategies are based on honor, tradition, and predictable patterns. We have failed because we think like them logically. But humans... Admiral Aztec paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Humans think chaotically, unpredictably. You fight wars in ways that make no sense to us, yet somehow you win. Carol laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. So you try to kill us because we were unpredictable and violent. Now you want us to be unpredictable and violent for you. The irony is not lost on us, Zethkar admitted. We feared what humanity might become. Now that fear may be the only thing that can save us all. Jake stood up and walked to the screen, staring directly at the alien leader. You want our help? Fine, but it comes with conditions. Name them, Zethkar said immediately. Full recognition of human sovereignty over our colonies and territories. Reparations for the genocide. Permanent seats on all galactic governing bodies. And the right to settle in any system we choose, including the core worlds. The chamber erupted in angry voices as alien representatives protested the demands. Zethkar raised a clawed hand for silence. These terms are significant, he said carefully. Those are our terms, Carol said. standing beside Jake. "Take them or face this void swarm alone." "We need time to consider Dash," began High Crystalline Veltar. "No time," Katie interrupted. "You said this threat was urgent. You have 1 hour to give us an answer. After that, we go back to our colonies and you never hear from us again." The transmission ended, leaving the humans alone in the conference room. For a long moment, nobody spoke. "Think they'll agree?" Tony asked. "They'll agree," Dan said with certainty. "They're desperate enough to give up everything they've fought to keep from us." Carol moved to the window and looked out at the stars. "The question is whether we can live with ourselves if we help them, and whether we can live with ourselves if we don't." Jake thought about the memorial gardens back on New Terra, about all the names carved in stone. Sarah's name was there among them. If he helped these aliens, would he be betraying her memory? But if he didn't help them, how many more names would be added to memorial walls across the galaxy? Outside the station, the stars burned cold and distant, offering no answers to questions written in blood and regret. The hidden world of Haven floated in the shadow of a dead star, invisible to most sensors, and known only to a few hundred humans. It had been humanity's secret for 30 years, the place where Admiral Carol Bennett commanded the scattered fleets that protected the surviving colonies. Deep beneath Haven's surface, in a conference room carved from solid rock, the human leadership gathered to debate their response to the Galactic Council's plea. The room was simple and functional, with no decorations except for a single painting of Earth as it had looked before the burning. Fleet Admiral Ryan Clark sat at the head of the table, his scarred face showing every one of his 60 years. He had lost his left arm in the defense of New Shanghai and walked with a limp from shrapnel wounds taken at the Battle of Kepler 7. He represented the hardliners, the humans who believed forgiveness was the same as surrender. "I've heard enough," Ryan said, slamming his good hand on the table. "These aliens want our help now. But where were they when we were dying? Where were they when our children were burning?" Across from him sat Dr. Elena Garcia, a xenobiologist whose gentle manner hit a core of steel. She had lost her husband and 2 sons in Purge, yet she had spent the last 20 years studying alien cultures, trying to understand what had driven them to such extremes. "Ryan, I understand your anger," Elena said quietly. "We all lost people we loved. But if we let our pain control us, we become as bad as they were." "As bad as they were?" Ryan's voice rose. "Elena, they tried to exterminate our entire species. There is no as bad as that." Carol Bennett listened to the debate from her chair at the far end of the table. As a senior military officer, her voice would carry significant weight in whatever decision they made, but she had not spoken yet, choosing instead to hear all arguments before committing herself. "The practical question," said General Pete Johnson, "is whether we can afford to let the galaxy fall. If this void swarm is as dangerous as they claim, our colonies won't be safe either." Pete was younger than most of the others in the room, only 45, but had commanded successful operations against alien raiders for the past decade. His specialty was reconnaissance, and his reports were always thorough and accurate. "I've been studying the data they provided," he continued. 17 star systems completely consumed in 6 months. That's not just conquest, that's elimination. If the pattern continues, the swarm will reach the Outer Rim territories within 5 years. "Maybe that's what we need," said Colonel Amy Stevens from her position near the wall. She was a combat veteran who had never married, never had children, and claimed she had never wanted them. Her entire life was devoted to military service and protecting humanity's future. "Maybe we need the galaxy to burn," Amy continued. "Maybe we need to start over somewhere else, somewhere clean." Elena shook her head. "Amy, there is nowhere else. This galaxy is our home too, whether we like it or not. Running away won't solve anything. Neither will fighting their wars for them," Ryan replied. "If we help them now, what happens next time they decide we're a threat? Do we just forget the genocide and pretend we're all friends?" Carol finally spoke, her voice cutting through the argument like a knife. "The question isn't whether we can forget. The question is whether we can afford to let our hatred destroy us along with everyone else." The room fell silent. Carol stood and moved to the painting of Earth, her back to the others as she spoke. I was there when the alien fleets came, she said. I watched the cities burn from orbit while we evacuated what civilians we could. I held dying children in my arms and promised them they would be safe, knowing it was a lie. The Joint Command Center on Kepler Station buzzed with tension as alien and human officers worked side by side for the first time in 50 years. The station itself was of Vorthan construction, all flowing curves and crystalline surfaces that caught and reflected light in patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Colonel Amy Stevens stood before a massive tactical display, watching his fleet positions updated in real time. Around her, officers from 6 different species tried to coordinate their forces against an enemy none of them fully understood. The Void Swarm has been detected in the Rigel system, announced Commander Zarthol, a Krillian tactical officer whose compound eyes could process data faster than most computers. They are moving toward the civilian evacuation routes. Standard defensive formation, Admiral Esek commanded from her position at the center of the room. Her serpentine body coiled around a control pillar as she directed the Allied fleets. All ships maintain position and engage at maximum range. Amy watched the alien formations on the display and shook her head. That won't work. Every alien in the room turned to look at her. The tension was immediate and obvious. These beings have been fighting wars for thousands of years, while humans were still learning to make fire. The idea that a human would question their tactics was almost insulting. Explain, Esesthek said in a carefully neutral tone. Amy stepped closer to the display and began highlighting enemy positions. Look at the Void Swarm's approach pattern. They're not just moving randomly. They're analyzing your defensive positions and calculating the most efficient counterattack. That is how war is fought, said High Crystalline Melterra, her voice chiming like wind through crystal formations. Logic and efficiency determine victory. Against other logical opponents, maybe, Amy replied, but you're fighting an enemy that outlogics all of you. You can't beat perfect logic with imperfect logic. Captain Tony Martinez, Amy's second-in-command, pulled up tactical records from previous human conflicts. Show them the Battle of New Canberra, he said. The display changed, showing a battle from 20 years earlier when human colonists had fought off a pirate raid. The pirates had superior numbers and better ships, but the humans had won through unconventional tactics. 300 pirates and 40 ships attacked a colony, defended by 50 humans in 12 ships, Tony explained. By all logical calculations, the colony should have fallen in less than an hour. What happened? Asked Commander Zarthol. The humans ignored the pirate fleet entirely, Amy said. Instead, they attacked the pirate supply depot on an asteroid 30 light minutes away. While the pirates were busy conquering an empty colony, the humans destroyed their fuel, ammunition, and repair facilities. The aliens stared at the tactical display in confusion. This made no sense according to their understanding of warfare. But the colony was defenseless, Esesthek protested. The pirates could have destroyed everything. The pirates were logical, Tony replied. They thought like you do. Protect what's valuable, fight for territory, maintain defensive positions. They never considered that humans might sacrifice the colony to win the war. That's insane, Melterra chimed. You risked everything you were trying to protect. Amy smiled grimly. Exactly. And because it was insane, it worked. The pirates ran out of fuel trying to chase our ships and had to abandon the system. We rebuilt the colony, and they never came back. Admiral Esesthek uncoiled from her control pillar and moved closer to the human officers. Her snake-like form was intimidating, but Amy held her ground. You are suggesting we abandon defensive positions and attack targets that seem unimportant? Esesthek asked. I'm suggesting you let us fight the way we know how, Amy replied. You want human help? Then accept human methods. The debate was interrupted by alarms throughout the command center. New contacts had appeared on the tactical display. Dozens of Void Swarm entities emerging from hyperspace near Kepler Station itself. They're here, Commander Zarthol announced unnecessarily. Amy watched the swarm formations on the display. They moved with mechanical precision, each unit in perfect coordination with the others. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, like watching a perfect killing machine in motion. All ships, assume defensive positions, Admiral Sesek ordered. Belay that order, Amy said quickly, Tony, signal our ships. Execute plan chaos. Colonel Stevens, Sesek's voice was sharp with anger. I am in command of this operation. You're in command of your ships, Amy replied, not taking her eyes off the display. I'm in command of mine. The human ships broke formation and scattered in what appeared to be random directions. Some headed toward the void swarm. Others fled toward empty space. Still others began attacking what seemed like meaningless targets. What are they doing? Melterra asked in confusion. Amy pointed to the display. Watch the swarm's response. The void swarm entities paused in their advance. For the first time since the war began, they seemed uncertain. Their formations wavered as they tried to analyze the humans' chaotic movements. They can't predict what we're going to do next, Tony explained. Their entire tactical system is based on logical analysis of enemy behavior. But there's no logic to what we're doing. Captain Jake Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system. Amy, we're in position. Ready for Phase 2. Execute, Amy ordered. Suddenly the chaos resolved into purpose. The human ships that had seemed to flee in panic were now attacking the swarm from behind. The ships that had appeared to attack random targets had actually been destroying swarm communication relays. The ships that had charged straight at the enemy were now providing covering fire for civilian evacuation vessels. Brilliant, breathed Commander Zarthal. You made them think you were defeated while actually achieving all your tactical objectives. It's not over yet, Amy warned. The swarm learns fast. This trick will only work once. On the display, she could see the void swarm entities beginning to adapt. Their formations tightened, and they started responding to human tactics with countermoves that suggested rapid learning. All human vessels, execute withdrawal, Amy ordered. Phase 3 begins now. Phase 3? Admiral, Sesek asked. We run away, Tony said with a grin, and we let them chase us into the trap. The human ships fled the battle zone, broadcasting fake distress signals that suggested they were badly damaged and fleeing in panic. The void swarm, interpreting this as logical behavior, followed in pursuit. They followed the humans straight into the gravity well of Kepler Station Sun. Now, Amy said quietly, hidden ships that had been disguised as space debris throughout the system suddenly came to life. They weren't warships. They were mining vessels loaded with antimatter charges. As the void swarm passed through the inner system, the mining ships detonated simultaneously. The explosion lit up the system like a new star. When the radiation cleared, 2/3 of the swarm entities had been destroyed. The survivors retreated in what could only be described as confusion. The command center erupted in cheers from both alien and human officers. It was the first major victory against the void swarm since the war began. Admiral Sesek approached Amy with something that might have been respect in her serpentine features. That was most unconventional. That was human, Amy replied. We don't fight to preserve honor or follow ancient traditions. We fight to win. But the mining ships, Melterra said, the crews aboard them, volunteered, Tony said simply. They knew it was a one-way mission. They did it anyway because winning the battle was more important than individual survival. The aliens were quiet for a moment, processing this concept. The idea of deliberately sacrificing valuable resources, including lives, for tactical advantage was foreign to their way of thinking. How many more tricks like this do you have? Commander Zarthal asked. Amy looked at the tactical display, where the remaining void swarm entities were retreating toward deep space. We got enough tricks to win this war, she said. The question is whether you're prepared for what victory looks like when humans are fighting it. Outside the station's viewports, debris from the destroyed swarm entities drifted through space like metallic snow. For the first time since the invasion began, the galaxy's defenders had something they had almost forgotten: hope. But Amy knew this was just the beginning. The void swarm would adapt to human tactics eventually. When that happened, humanity would have become even more unpredictable, even more dangerous than their enemies had ever imagined possible. Commander Lucy Thompson gripped the armrest of her chair as the UES Redemption shook under enemy fire. Through the bridge's main view screen, she could see the elegant forms of Naga warships fighting alongside her own vessel against the advancing Void Swarm. It felt wrong. Every instinct she had developed over 20 years of military service screamed that the snake-like aliens were the enemy. Their ships had been the ones that glassed her homeworld of New Brisbane. Their weapons had killed her parents and most of her friends. "Lucy, we need to coordinate our attack runs with the Naga Squadron," said Lieutenant Commander Steve Powell from the tactical station. His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Steve had lost his wife and daughter when the Naga attacked New Canberra 5 years after the main purge. "Signal Admiral Esek," Lucy said through gritted teeth. "Tell her we're ready to begin the assault." The communication screen flickered to life, showing the interior of a Naga command ship. Admiral SSS Serpentine form coiled around her command throne, her golden scales reflecting the ship's lighting. Behind her, Lucy could see other Naga officers moving with that fluid grace that had once been terrifying to human eyes. "Commander Thompson," Athek said, her translated voice carrying a tone Lucy couldn't quite identify. "Your ships are positioned well. Our combined strike should break through their defensive screen." Lucy nodded curtly. "Agreed. Begin the attack when ready." As the screen went dark, Steve moved closer to Lucy's command chair. 5 years ago, I would have shot any human who suggested working with a Naga." 5 years ago, they were trying to kill us," Lucy replied. "Hell, they were still raiding our shipping lanes 2 years ago. And now here we are, trusting them to watch our backs." Lucy looked at the tactical display, showing the mixed human and Naga formations preparing to assault a Void Swarm position. It was surreal. These same ship types had once hunted human vessels through asteroid fields, showing no mercy to civilian transports or colony ships. "Contact from a Naga flagship," announced Communications Officer Jenny Davis. "Put it through." Admiral Estek appeared on the screen again, but this time she seemed hesitant. "Commander Thompson, I must speak plainly. My crew is uncomfortable with this alliance. They remember the battles we fought against your people." "Your crew is uncomfortable?" Lucy's voice rose despite her efforts to stay professional. "Admiral, your people killed 3 billion humans. My crew is fighting alongside the ships that murder their families. If anyone has a right to be uncomfortable, it's us." SSS Thek was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "You are correct. We have no right to complain about discomfort when we cause so much pain." Lucy studied the alien's face on the screen. She had never heard a Naga officer acknowledge wrongdoing before. Usually they spoke of the purge as a necessary action or a strategic decision. "Why?" Lucy asked suddenly. "Why did you do it? We never attacked your worlds. We never threatened your people. Why did you try to wipe us out?" SSS Deck's serpentine body shifted uncomfortably. "Fear," she said simply. "We were afraid of what you might become." "What we might become?" "Your species spread across the galaxy faster than any other in recorded history. You adapted to environments that should have been impossible for carbon-based life. You fought wars with tactics that made no logical sense but somehow worked." Lucy felt anger building in her chest. "So you killed us because we were successful?" "We killed you because you were unpredictable," SSS Deck replied. "In a galaxy where most conflict are resolved through negotiation or ritual combat, humans simply fought to win by any means necessary. That terrified us." "Good," Steve said loudly enough for the pickup to catch his voice. "You should have been terrified." SSS Deck's attention shifted to him. "You are Lieutenant Commander Powell, are you not? The defender of New Canberra?" Steve's face went white. "You know about that?" "I was there," Anthek said quietly. "I commanded one of the ships in the attack fleet. I watched you hold off 6 of our cruisers with a single damaged frigate for 12 hours, while civilian transports evacuated." The bridge fell completely silent. Lucy could feel the tension radiating from her crew. Steve's defense of New Canberra was legendary among the survivors. He had saved over 2 million people by refusing to surrender even when his ship was falling apart around him. You killed 100,000 people on that world, Steve said, his voice barely controlled. Yes, SS Aztec replied, and you saved 2 million. Your tactics made no sense. You should have surrendered when your shields failed. Any logical commander would have tried to negotiate terms. But you didn't surrender, she continued. You kept fighting even when your weapons were offline. You rammed our cruiser with a ship that was already dead in space. No Naga commander would have made such a sacrifice. It worked, didn't it? Steve said bitterly. It worked magnificently, Aztec admitted, and it terrified us more than anything we had ever seen. A species willing to sacrifice everything, even their own lives, to protect others. We did not know how to fight an enemy like that. Lucy leaned forward in her chair. So you decided to exterminate us instead of trying to understand us. Yes, SSX said again. It was cowardice disguised as strategy. We took the easy path instead of the right one. The communication was interrupted by alarms throughout both ships. The Void Swarm had detected their approach and was moving to intercept. We can finish this conversation later, Lucy said. Right now, we have a battle to fight. Agreed. But, Commander, when this battle is over, I would like to speak with you privately. There are things I need to say that should not wait for a better time. The screen went dark as both fleets moved into combat formation. Lucy watched the tactical display as human and Naga ships arranged themselves for the attack. The coordination was nearly perfect, as if they had been training together for years instead of fighting each other. All ships. This is Commander Thompson. Lucy announced on the fleet channel. Begin attack run in 30 seconds. Lucy, Steve said quietly, what do you think you want to talk about? I don't know, Lucy replied, but I have a feeling it's going to hurt. The battle began with a coordinated strike that would have been impossible with either fleet alone. Human ships provided covering fire, while Naga vessels used their superior speed to outflank the swarm positions. The alien snake-like reflexes and the humans' unpredictable tactics proved to be a devastating combination. For 2 hours they fought side by side, saving each other's ships and sharing tactical information. Lucy found herself relying on SSS's experience and strategic thinking, while the Naga admirals seemed to appreciate the humans' ability to improvise solutions to unexpected problems. When the last swarm entity was destroyed, both fleets regrouped in the outer system. The victory celebration was muted. Too many on both sides remembered when they had been enemies. Commander Thompson, came SSS's voice over the private channel. Are you willing to speak with me now? Lucy looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They all wore the same expression. Exhaustion mixed with confusion. Fighting alongside their former enemies was taking an emotional toll on everyone. I'll beam over to your ship, Lucy said. No, SSS replied quickly. I will come to yours. It is the least I can do. 20 minutes later, Admiral SSS materialized in the Redemption's briefing room. Without her command throne and the familiar surroundings of her own ship, she seemed smaller, less intimidating, more like a person than a symbol of alien menace. Thank you for seeing me, SSS said as she coiled her body into a resting position across from Lucy. What did you want to talk about? SSS was quiet for a long moment, as if gathering courage. I wanted to apologize. For the war? For New Canberra specifically. For the people I killed there. I know that words cannot undo what was done, but I needed you to know that I remember every ship we destroyed, every life we took. Lucy felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Why tell me this? Because you have a right to know that your enemies were not monsters. We were people who made terrible choices out of fear. We convinced ourselves that we were protecting the galaxy, but we were only protecting ourselves from having to change. Do you regret it? Lucy asked. Every day, SSS replied without hesitation. But regret is useless unless it leads to better choices. That is why I fight alongside you now, despite what my crew thinks of the decision. Lucy stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the mixed fleet of human and alien ships. My parents died in the bombardment of New Brisbane. I was off-world at the academy when it happened. I didn't even get to say goodbye. I am sorry. For 20 years I've hated your people. I've dreamed about killing Naga officers with my bare hands. And now here I am, trusting you to protect my ship and my crew." She turned back to face the alien admiral. "I don't know how to let go of that hatred. I'm not even sure I should." "Perhaps you should not let go of it entirely," Esethek said thoughtfully. "Perhaps you should use it to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Your anger could be a weapon against injustice rather than just a weapon against my people." Lucy considered this. "Is that what you're doing? Using your regret as a weapon?" "I am trying to," Sisethek replied. "Whether I succeed or not remains to be seen." Outside the viewport, the stars burned with cold light, offering no answers to questions that had no easy solutions. But for the first time in 20 years, Lucy felt like she might be able to sleep without dreaming of revenge. General Rick Davis stood in the command center of Nexus Prime, watching the tactical displays with growing concern. The galactic capital stretched out before him through the massive viewports, its towers and spires reaching toward space like metallic fingers. Billions of beings from dozens of species lived and worked in this city, making it the heart of galactic civilization. And the Void Swarm was coming. "General, we're receiving reports from the outer defense grid," announced Major Nicole Brown, his aide and communications officer. "The swarm has broken through the third line. Estimated time to reach Nexus Prime is 18 hours. Rick nodded grimly. The mathematics were clear. Despite the early victories, despite the successful cooperation between human and alien forces, the Void Swarm was winning the war. For every entity they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "What about the evacuation?" he asked. "Proceeding as fast as possible," Nicole replied. "But, General, we're talking about evacuating the population of an entire planet. Even with every transport in the galaxy, we can only move a fraction of the civilians before the swarm arrives." The door to the command center opened and Admiral Carol Bennett entered, followed by Captain Jake Morrison and several alien commanders. Carol looked exhausted, her usually perfect uniform wrinkled and stained from days of nonstop planning sessions. "Rick," she said without preamble, "we need to talk. Privately." Rick followed Carol to a smaller briefing room, where Jake was waiting with Admiral SSSTech and High Crystalline Veltar. The alien leaders looked as tired as the humans, their usual composure cracked by the strain of the failing war effort. "We're losing," Carol said bluntly as soon as the door closed. "The conventional approach isn't working. We need to consider other options." "What kind of options?" Rick asked, though he suspected he already knew. Carol activated a holographic display showing the galactic core region. "Scorched Earth. We deny the swarm resources by destroying everything they might consume." The aliens in the room recoiled visibly. High Crystalline Veltar's light patterns shifted to what Rick had learned indicated distress. "You are suggesting we destroy inhabited worlds." Veltar chimed. "Billions of innocent lives." "I'm suggesting we save the species by sacrificing the individuals," Carol replied coldly. "It's the only way to stop the swarm's exponential growth." Admiral Sisek coiled her serpentine body tighter around her chair. "This is exactly what we feared from your species 50 years ago. The willingness to destroy everything to achieve your goals." Jake stepped forward. "With respect, Admiral, 50 years ago you feared we might become conquerors. Today we're talking about becoming saviors. There's a difference." "Is there?" SSSTech asked. "If we destroy worlds to save the galaxy, how are we different from the swarm?" "Because we're doing it to preserve life, not eliminate it," Rick said. "The swarm consumes everything. We're trying to save what we can." Veltar's crystalline form pulsed with agitated light. "General Davis, you are asking us to become accomplices to genocide. Again." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Everyone in the room understood the implication. The same alien leaders who had once authorized humanity's near extinction were now being asked to participate in the destruction of other worlds. "It's not genocide," Carol said firmly. "It's triage. We evacuate who we can and deny the enemy what we can't protect." "And who decides which worlds are expendable?" SSSTech demanded. "Who chooses which species live and which die?" "We do," Rick said quietly. "The people in this room. Because if we don't make these choices, the swarm will make them for us. The debate continued for 2 hours, but the mathematics remained unchanged. The Void Swarm was consuming resources faster than the Allied fleets could destroy them. Without drastic action, the entire galaxy would be consumed within a decade. Finally, Veltar spoke in tones like breaking glass. If we agree to this strategy, what guarantees do we have that humans will not turn these tactics against us when the swarm is defeated? Carol looked directly at the crystalline alien. You have my word. Your word? SSS Thek's laugh was bitter. Forgive me, Admiral, but words from a species we tried to exterminate carry little weight. Jake stepped closer to the alien commanders. Then don't trust our words. Trust our actions. For 50 years we could have taken revenge on any of you. We had the capability. Hell, we had the motivation. But we didn't. Because you were too weak, SSS Thek replied. No, Jake said. Because revenge wouldn't bring back our dead. It would just create more bodies to mourn. Rick activated a new display, showing current fleet positions. We've identified 3 systems in the swarm's path that are too heavily populated to evacuate, but too resource-rich to leave intact. Kronos, Viridian, and Altair 7. Combined population of 12 billion beings. The aliens stared at the display in horror. 12 billion. Veltar whispered. We would be responsible for 12 billion deaths. You'll be responsible for saving the rest of the galaxy, Carol corrected. The swarm will kill them anyway if we do nothing. At least this way their sacrifice means something. Admiral Thek was quiet for a long moment, her serpentine form motionless. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I have already participated in one genocide. I will not do it again. Then you doom the galaxy, Rick said simply, because this is the only way to stop them. The alien commanders left the briefing room without agreeing to the plan. Rick and Carol were alone with Jake, staring at the tactical displays that showed the swarm's relentless advance. Think they'll agree? Jake asked. They'll agree, Carol said with certainty. They're scared. Scared enough to do anything that might save their worlds. And if they don't, Carol's expression hardened. Then we implement the plan without them. Humanity has already done the hard thing once. We can do it again. Outside the command center, Major Nicole Brown was coordinating the evacuation efforts. Her voice carried across the communications channels as she directed transport ships and refugee convoys. Nicole, Rick said as he approached her station, I need you to prepare for Operation Phoenix. Nicole's face went pale. Operation Phoenix was humanity's most closely guarded secret, a contingency plan developed during the darkest days of the Purge. It was designed to ensure that even if humanity fell, they would not fall alone. Sir, are you sure? Prepare it, Rick said, but don't implement it yet. We're going to give diplomacy one more chance. 3 hours later, the alien commanders returned. Admiral SSS Thek spoke for all of them. We agree to your strategy, she said, her voice hollow with defeat. May the universe forgive us for what we are about to do. Rick felt no satisfaction in the victory. The universe will forgive us if we save it. If we fail, forgiveness won't matter because there won't be anyone left to grant it. As the combined fleets moved toward their assigned positions, Rick watched the evacuation ships fleeing Nexus Prime. Millions of beings who had never heard of Earth or humanity were trusting their lives to the species their leaders had once tried to destroy. The irony was not lost on him. Humanity had become the galaxy's last hope by becoming everything their enemies had once feared they might become. They were no longer the victims of genocide. They were its architects. But sometimes, Rick thought as he watched the stars burn in the darkness, survival required becoming the monster you swore you would never be. The question was whether they would still be human when the war was over. The Magellan Cluster burned with the light of 1,000 battles. Admiral Carol Bennett stood on the bridge of the UES Phoenix, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for humanity's final gamble against the Void Swarm. Around her, officers from every surviving species worked side by side at control stations. The bridge itself was a mixture of human efficiency and alien technology. with crystalline Vorten displays providing tactical information, while Naga biocomputers processed targeting data faster than any conventional system. Admiral, all fleets report ready, announced Captain Amy Stevens from the tactical station. Phoenix Network is online and synchronized. Carol nodded, trying to hide the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. For 6 months she had been preparing for this moment, ever since the first reports of the Void Swarm's adaptive capabilities. Traditional warfare had failed. Even human unpredictability had proven insufficient as the enemy learned to counter their tactics. But humanity had one final card to play. Signal all ships, Carol ordered. Begin implementation of Project Phoenix. Across the fleet, human vessels began deploying a network of artificial intelligence nodes, each one based on neural patterns taken from human volunteers. The AI system was designed to think like humans, chaotically, unpredictably, with the kind of creative desperation that came from facing extinction. Phoenix Network is fully deployed, reported Dr. Elena Garcia from the science station. Elena had volunteered her own neural patterns of project, along with dozens of other humans who understood that their minds might be the key to victory. On the main display, the Void Swarm appeared as a dark cloud spreading across space. Millions of mechanical entities moved in perfect formation, their logical minds calculating the most efficient way to consume everything in their path. "They're beautiful in a way," said Commander Lucy Thompson, who had joined the flagship for the final battle. "Perfect killing machines with no hatred, no fear, no emotion at all." "That's going to be their weakness," Carol replied. "They can't understand us because they don't feel what we feel." Jake Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system from his position with the advanced scouts. "Carol, the swarm is responding to our deployment. They're adapting their formation to counter traditional AI tactics." "Good," Carol said with a grim smile. "Let them waste time preparing for something we're not going to do." The Phoenix Network came online with a sound like thunder in space. Suddenly, every human ship in the fleet was connected to an artificial intelligence that thought with the combined creativity of hundreds of human minds. "Phoenix AI active," announced the synthesized voice of network. All systems nominal, ready to show these logical bastards what chaos looks like. Even the AI had developed human attitude. Carol noted with approval. The battle began not with a traditional exchange of long-range fire, but with something unprecedented in galactic warfare. The human ships suddenly began behaving in ways that violated every known principle of military tactics. Some vessels charged directly into swarm formation with no apparent plan or support. Others fled in apparent panic, broadcasting distress signals that seemed genuine. Still others began attacking empty space, firing at targets that didn't exist. The Void Swarm paused in its advance, its collective intelligence struggling to process what it was seeing. This behavior made no logical sense. There was no tactical advantage to the human actions, no strategic objective that could be achieved through such chaos. "Phase 2, Carol ordered. The apparent chaos resolved into deadly purpose. The ships that had charged into the swarm formation had been planting antimatter mines throughout the enemy ranks. The ships that had fled in panic were now returning with reinforcements from hidden positions. The ships that had been firing at empty space had been destroying invisible swarm communication, nodes that no conventional sensor could detect. But the Phoenix Network was just getting started. "Enemy adaptation in progress," the AI announced. "They're beginning to counter our tactics, initiating creative response protocols." What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries, assuming any historian survived to study it. The Phoenix Network began generating tactics that had never been used before, strategies that emerged from the chaotic interaction of hundreds of human thought patterns. Ships began using debris from destroyed swarm entities as weapons, flinging chunks of alien technology at enemy formations with devastating effect. Others started broadcasting human music and poetry at the swarm, somehow disrupting their communication networks through pure cultural noise. Most remarkably, some human vessels began deliberately damaging themselves to confuse enemy targeting systems. The swarm couldn't understand why ships would make themselves weaker, so they wasted computational cycles trying to analyze the tactical benefit of self-inflicted wounds. "Admiral," called out Admiral Esselstech from her command position, Your ships are? This is impossible. How are they coordinating such complex maneuvers without central command? They're not coordinating, Carol replied. They're improvising. Each ship is making independent decisions based on what feels right in the moment. That should result in complete tactical chaos. It does, Carol agreed. And that's exactly what's winning the battle. On the tactical display, the Void Swarm's perfect formations were beginning to collapse. Their logical minds couldn't process the sheer randomness of human behavior amplified by artificial intelligence. Every time they adapted to one tactic, the humans switched to something completely different. Jake Morrison's squadron suddenly appeared behind the main swarm force, having somehow traveled through a route that sensors insisted was impossible. Lucy Thompson's ships began firing their weapons in rhythm with an ancient Earth song called the Battle Hymn of the Republic, the musical timing creating interference patterns that disrupted swarm shields. Phoenix Network reporting significant enemy confusion. The AI announced what sounded suspiciously like satisfaction. Enemy forces are beginning to retreat from forward positions. Retreat. Admiral SSS Deck Serpentine form coiled in surprise. The swarm has never retreated from any battle. They have now, Carol said, because they finally encountered something they can't compute, the human spirit backed by artificial intelligence. But the victory came at a cost. The Phoenix Network was burning through its neural pattern storage at an alarming rate. The AI minds that thought like humans were consuming themselves in the effort to outthink a perfect enemy. Dr. Garcia, Carol called out, how long can the network maintain current operations? Elena's face was pale as she checked her instruments. At current consumption rates, maybe 6 more hours. The AI patterns are degrading under the computational load. Then we end this now, Carol decided. All ships, prepare for final assault. Phoenix Network, give me everything you've got. The AI's response was immediate and devastating. Every human ship in the fleet suddenly began moving in perfect synchronization, not because they were following orders, but because hundreds of artificial human minds had spontaneously reached the same creative conclusion. They formed a pattern in space that resembled a flower, beautiful, organic, and completely illogical from a tactical standpoint. The Void Swarm tried desperately to analyze the formation, to understand what advantage it could possibly provide. They never figured it out before the flower bloomed. At the center of the formation, a single ship, Jake Morrison's Old Defiance, detonated its entire antimatter supply in a controlled explosion that created a temporary rift in space-time. The rift pulled the main swarm force into a pocket dimension where the laws of physics worked differently, where logical thinking became impossible. Trapped in a realm of pure chaos, the Void Swarm's collective intelligence shattered. Without their perfect logic to guide them, the mechanical entities simply shut down, becoming harmless debris floating in impossible space. The battle was over. The war was won, and humanity had saved the galaxy by becoming more human than they had ever been before. Phoenix Network shutting down, the AI announced, its voice fading as the neural patterns finally exhausted themselves. It's been an honor serving with you all. Take care of each other. In the silence that followed, Admiral Carol Bennett looked around at the mixed crews on her bridge. Humans and aliens who had been enemies 6 months ago now embraced each other in celebration. Admiral, Lisa Morrison said from her position at the communication station, we're receiving surrender signals from swarm entities throughout the galaxy. The network collapse is spreading. It's over. Carol nodded, feeling older than her years but oddly peaceful. Signal, all ships. Stand down from battle stations. Begin search and rescue operations for any survivors. As the fleet began the long process of mopping up the remaining swarm entities, Carol thought about the price they had paid for victory. They had sacrificed human minds to create the Phoenix Network, had deliberately made themselves into weapons of chaos and unpredictability. But they had saved the galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, they had proven that humanity deserved its place among the stars after all. 2 years after the Battle of Magellan Cluster, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the Memorial Gardens on New Terra. But the place looked very different now. The human memorial stones remained, but they were surrounded by new monuments from every species in the galaxy. Krillian crystal spires honored their war dead, while Naga living sculptures grew and changed to represent the cycle of life and death. The most striking addition was a massive holographic display that showed the names of everyone who had died fighting the Void Swarm, human, alien, and artificial intelligence alike. The Phoenix Network's neural patterns have been given individual recognition, each artificial mind listed by name as if it had been a living person. Jake was no longer Captain Morrison. His promotion to Admiral had come with command of the new Galactic Defense Coalition, a joint military force designed to prevent any future existential threats to galactic civilization. "Admiral," said a familiar voice behind him. Jake turned to see Ambassador Katie Walsh, approaching with a delegation of alien diplomats. Katie wore the formal robes of her new position as Earth's first ambassador to the reformed Galactic Council. Behind her walked Admiral SSSTEC, High Crystalline Veltar, and other former enemies who were now reluctant allies. "Katie," Jake said with a slight smile, "how did the final negotiations go?" "The Nexus Accords have been signed by all major species," Katie replied. "Full recognition of human sovereignty, guaranteed territorial rights, and permanent representation on all governing bodies. And the reparations will be paid over the next 50 years, Admiral SSX said. Her serpentine form coiled to what Jake had learned was a posture of respect. The first ships carrying industrial equipment and raw materials departed for human colonies yesterday. Jake nodded, but his expression remained serious. "And what about the other issue?" Katie's smile faded. "That's more complicated. The other issue was Colonel Marcus Thompson and his separatist movement. Marcus led a growing faction of humans who believed that humanity should abandon the galaxy entirely and seek new worlds beyond the galactic rim. They argued that the same species who had once committed genocide could not be trusted to honor any treaty, no matter what they promised. Marcus has support from about 30% of the surviving human population," Katie continued. "He's been recruiting heavily from military veterans and people who lost family in the purge. Can you blame them?" Jake asked. "We saved these aliens from extinction, and they're still arguing about how much they owe us for the privilege." High Crystalline Veltar chimed in with tones like wind through crystal caves. "Admiral Morrison, not all of our people are happy with the new arrangements either. There are those who believe humans have gained too much influence too quickly. They're afraid we'll become the thing they once claimed we were." Jake said, "Conquerors instead of protectors." "Yes," Veltar admitted. "The fear remains, even after everything." Ake walked among the memorial stones, running his weathered hand over names carved in stone and light. Sarah Morrison's marker was still there, but it was no longer alone. It was surrounded by millions of other names, human and alien alike, all of them victims of wars that could have been prevented. "You know what the irony is?" Jake said to the assembled diplomats. 50 years ago, you were afraid that humans would spread across the galaxy and change everything. You were right. We did change everything. Just not the way you expected." "How so?" asked Admiral SSSTEC. "You expected us to become conquerors," Jake replied. "Instead, we became teachers. We taught you how to think unpredictably, how to fight when logic says you should surrender, how to hope when mathematics says you should despair." He stopped before a new monument that showed the final moments of the Battle of Magellan Cluster, when Jake's old ship Defiance had sacrificed itself to create the dimensional rift that trapped the Void Swarm. "My daughter Lisa was on that ship," Jake said quietly. "She volunteered for the suicide mission because she believed the galaxy was worth saving, even after everything it had done to us." "She survived," Katie pointed out. "Barely," Jake replied. "And she's changed. They all are the ones who served in the Phoenix Network. They gave parts of their minds to create that AI, and they can never get those parts back." Lisa Morrison approached from across the memorial garden, her uniform bearing the insignia of a full commander. At 30, she looked older than her years, with premature gray streaks in her hair and eyes that seemed to see things others could not. "Dad," she said, nodding to the alien delegates. "Ambassadors, the ceremony is about to begin." Today marked the official opening of the Galactic Peace Institute, a new organization dedicated to preventing conflicts before they could escalate into wars. It was humanity's idea, based on their hard-learned understanding that prevention was easier than victory. The ceremony took place in New Geneva, the rebuilt human capital that now served as home to dozens of alien embassies. Jake watched from the platform as beings from across the galaxy gathered to celebrate the new era of cooperation. The main speaker was Dr. Elena Garcia, who had become the Institute's first director despite the neural damage she had suffered from contributing her mind to the Phoenix Network. She moved carefully, her thoughts sometimes disconnected from her words, but her message was clear. "We gather here not to forget the past, but to learn from it," Elena said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. 50 years ago, fear drove our species apart. 2 years ago, necessity brought us together. Today, we choose to stay together because we have learned that our differences make us stronger. In the audience, Jake could see the faces of both humans and aliens, former enemies sitting side by side. Children who had been born after the war played together in the spaces between the formal seating, their games mixing human imagination with alien traditions. But not everyone was celebrating. Marcus Thompson stood at the edge of the crowd with a group of his followers, their expressions grim and disapproving. They wore black armbands to show their disagreement with the peace process. After the ceremony, Marcus approached Jake directly. "Admiral," he said with barely controlled anger, "this is a mistake. These aliens will turn on us again the moment. They think they don't need us anymore." "Maybe," Jake admitted, "but running away won't solve that problem. It will only delay it. We could find new worlds beyond the galactic rim," Marcus argued. "Build a pure human civilization without the contamination of alien influence." Jake looked at Marcus with something like pity. "Marcus, there is no such thing as pure human civilization. We are what we are because of the challenges we've faced, the enemies we've fought, the friends we've made. Take away the aliens, and you take away part of what makes us human." "You're wrong," Marcus said. "Humanity can stand alone. We proved that during the Purge." "No," Lisa interjected, joining the conversation. "We proved that we could survive alone. That's not the same thing as thriving.